What happens when a dying woman's prejudice stands in the way of her own survival? This story will leave you questioning how far compassion can go to break through hate. Before we dive into this gripping story, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below, and let's see how far this story reaches. Hospitals are strange places. To some, they offer a glimmer of hope. To others, they feel like the end of the road. Every corridor has its stories, some of triumph, others of quiet despair. And in room 212 of St. Anthony's Medical Center, a story was unfolding that no one could have predicted. Angela Evans had been a nurse for nearly a decade. She wasn't new to the challenges of her profession. Long shifts, emotional farewells, miraculous recoveries, she had seen it all. But the hardest battles weren't always medical. Sometimes they were personal. And today, as she walked into room 212, she could already feel the weight of the confrontation ahead. The patient was Mrs. Evelyn Hargrove, an elderly woman in her late 70s who had been admitted 3 days ago for complications related to a chronic heart condition. Evelyn was frail, her thin frame lost in the oversized hospital gown she wore. Her pale, papery skin stretched over fragile bones, and her once vibrant blue eyes were clouded by both age and something darker, a lifetime of unyielding prejudice. Angela had been briefed on Evelyn's condition and her temperament. The charge nurse had pulled Angela aside earlier in the day. "She's difficult," the nurse had said, choosing her words carefully. "You'll need patience with this one." Angela had smiled politely, not needing further explanation. She'd faced her fair share of difficult patients before. It came with the territory, especially as a black nurse working in a profession still shadowed by unspoken biases. When Angela entered Evelyn's room, the atmosphere shifted immediately. The old woman's gaze, sharp despite her frailty, locked onto Angela like a hawk spotting prey. "Who are you?" Evelyn's voice was raspy but firm. Angela approached the bedside with her usual calm demeanor. "Good evening, Mrs. Hargrove. I'm Angela, your nurse for tonight. I'm here to check your vitals and see how you're feeling." Evelyn's lips thinned into a hard line. "I don't need you." Angela paused, her expression unchanging. "Mrs. Hargrove, I understand this might be a difficult time for you, but I'm here to help." Evelyn's hand gripped the edge of her blanket. Her voice rose, shaky, but filled with venom. "I said, I don't want you touching me. Get someone else." The words hung in the air like a slap. Angela stood silently for a moment, her heart heavy but her professionalism intact. She had heard such words before, too many times if she were honest, but they never stopped stinging. "Mrs. Hargrove," Angela began, her tone as gentle as ever, "I promise you, I'm here to provide the best care I can. My goal is to make sure you're comfortable and safe." But Evelyn turned her face to the wall, refusing to acknowledge Angela's presence. "I don't need care from someone like you." Outside the room, 2 nurses passing by exchanged uneasy glances. It wasn't the first time whispers about Evelyn Hargrove had circulated through the hospital. She had refused to speak to the black orderly who had brought her dinner tray the previous night, and had complained when an Asian doctor had performed her initial checkup. Angela placed the clipboard she was holding on the bedside table, her movements measured and deliberate. "I'll give you some time to think, Mrs. Hargrove. If you need anything, just press the call button." As she turned to leave, Evelyn muttered something under her breath. It was quiet, almost inaudible, but Angela caught the words. "People like her don't belong here." Angela walked out of the room, her expression neutral, though her mind churned. She had long ago learned not to internalize such remarks, but tonight, something about Evelyn's words lingered. They weren't just cruel. They felt deeply personal, almost rehearsed, as if born from decades of bitterness. The nurse's station was a small hub of activity, with staff moving briskly between phone calls and patient charts. Angela leaned against the counter, letting out a quiet sigh. One of her colleagues, Maria, noticed and approached her. "Evelyn again?" Maria asked sympathetically. Angela nodded. "She's set in her ways." "That's putting it lightly," Maria said, shaking her head. "I heard she gave Dr. Nguyen a hard time yesterday. She actually asked if there was an American doctor available." Angela let out a dry laugh. "Sounds about right." Despite the shared moment of levity, Angela couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Evelyn's hostility than simple prejudice. She reviewed the woman's medical chart, noting her history of heart issues, hypertension, and a recent bout of pneumonia. Evelyn's vitals had been stable earlier in the day, but something about her demeanor tonight felt off. Later that evening, as Angela made her rounds, she passed by Evelyn's room. The door was slightly ajar, and Angela hesitated for a moment before peeking inside. Evelyn was lying on her side, her face turned away from the door. Her breathing was shallow, her chest rising and falling in uneven intervals. Angela's brow furrowed. That wasn't normal. She stepped closer, her footsteps soft against the tiled floor. "Mrs. Hargrove," she said gently. Evelyn didn't respond. Angela moved closer, her nurse's intuition kicking in. She noticed that Evelyn's skin seemed paler than before, almost ashen. The old woman's hand, resting on the blanket, was trembling slightly. Something was wrong. Angela quickly returned to the nurse's station and grabbed a phone. "I need Dr. Hayes in room 212, she said, her voice calm but urgent. "I think there's a change in the patient's condition." Dr. Hayes, a no-nonsense physician with years of experience, arrived within minutes. Angela briefed him quickly as they walked toward Evelyn's room. When they entered, Evelyn stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked at Angela, her expression unreadable, before turning to Dr. Hayes. "I told her I didn't want her here," Evelyn said weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Hayes glanced at Angela, then back at Evelyn. "Mrs. Hargrove, Nurse Angela is one of the best we have. If something's wrong, she's the one you want by your side." Evelyn didn't respond. Her breathing grew more labored, and Angela's concern deepened. As the doctor began his examination, Angela noticed something on the bedside table. A small, weathered photograph tucked partially beneath Evelyn's glasses case. It showed a young woman, smiling brightly, standing next to a man in military uniform. Angela couldn't help but feel a strange sense of familiarity as she glanced at the photo. But before she could dwell on it, Evelyn let out a soft gasp, pulling everyone's attention back to her. "Mrs. Hargrove," Angela said, stepping forward, "can you tell us how you're feeling? Is there pain anywhere?" Evelyn's eyes darted between Angela and Dr. Hayes, her breathing shallow. I can't," she murmured, her voice trailing off. The tension in the room was thick, the air heavy with unspoken questions. Angela's instincts told her there was more to this situation than met the eye. And as she looked at Evelyn, a thought struck her. What if the hostility wasn't just about prejudice? What if there was something deeper, something Evelyn wasn't saying? The faint beep of the heart monitor filled the silence as Angela's mind raced. She couldn't shake the feeling that the photograph held a clue, but the moment to ask about it hadn't yet come. As the scene faded, one question lingered. What was Evelyn hiding, and would Angela discover it before it was too late? To be continued.